Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rhode Island Council for the Humanities Evaluation Workshop. My name is Julia Renaud, and I'm the Grant-Making Program Coordinator at the Council. So today we'll be talking about the Council's approach to public humanities project evaluation, how that approach informs our public humanities grant-making process, and how we hope our grantees approach evaluation in terms of their own projects. Hopefully, you will come away from this workshop with a greater understanding of project evaluation and how it relates to the public humanities projects that you might undertake, with or without the Council's funding. We also hope that you will be equipped with strategies that will help you to better plan and evaluate your projects. So, we're going to start by defining our terms, because there's often a good deal of confusion around the terms that I'll be using in today's presentation. So what do we mean when we talk about public humanities projects, evaluation, and evaluation plans? So what are public humanities projects? Well, I want to back up a step and talk about what the humanities are. So there's a lot of different definitions out there, but I like this one. The humanities are the stories and the ideas that help us understand our lives and our world. They offer us the opportunity to learn from our past, explore the present, and shape our future. They are about culture, community, and connections. The humanities emphasize the exchange of ideas, critical and imaginative thinking, and the pursuit of wisdom. So what's a public humanities project then? So a public humanities project is one of many of the vast array of projects that connect quality humanities knowledge and practices with all members of a community. So some examples of that are panel discussions on a particular community history within that community, exhibitions engaging with a particular culture, or a series of walking tours engaging with hyperlocal histories of a neighborhood that may not usually be discussed. And why do we do this? Why do we do public humanities projects? So the Council believes that cultural participation through the humanities contributes to greater connections between people, deeper understanding of our past and why it matters, and enhances the quality of places where we live, work, and explore. The Humanities Council believes that these factors are essential for civic health, a vital economy, and a stronger democracy. The Council supports individuals and organizations to conduct humanities projects to strengthen your capacity and also to contribute to these larger aims. So when we talk about evaluation of these projects, what are we talking about and why does it matter? Well, starting with why it matters, your evaluation process would ideally help you to demonstrate the impact your project has had on your community. So connecting to the impacts I just described that the public humanities can have. So specifically what evaluation is. When we say evaluation, we're talking about plans, strategies, and practices that allow us to better understand the impact of our work. These plans, strategies, and practices help us to make strategic decisions for our work and our organizations, and they help us to better understand what we do, how we do it, and the ways that we might improve. You know, often people think about evaluation as a process that happens at the end of a project, right? And therefore they only really think about it right at the end. So for example, someone might realize the night before their public program that they should probably have an audience survey. And then they might stay up all night trying to figure out what the questions are. And then once the audience members fill it out, then they realize they have no idea how to use the data that they collected and don't really know what questions that data is answering. So here at the Council, we believe that an evaluation plan should be created at the outset of a project, not at the last minute. And so if you create an evaluation plan at the beginning of your project, it can inform all stages of your project and provide real clarity and vision for what you're doing, how you do it, and above all, why you're doing it. It can help to plan the project, steer it, and improve future editions or similar projects. So, how might you put together an evaluation plan? So following the idea that evaluation can help to structure programs, it's important to begin thinking about the evaluative process at the beginning of the project cycle. So what is the project cycle? I've broken out 7 steps that we, break down a project in here at the council. So first is your project goal, and I'll pause and also say I'm going to go over all of this in excruciating detail. So this is just the overview. So first is the project goal, then your project outcomes, then your project outputs, then your project partners, so who you're partnering with on the project, then your communications and your publicity plan, then everyone's favorite, your budget and financial information for the project, and finally the evaluation that's going to be informed by all these previous steps. So we have this loop here because we think of the project cycle as exactly that, a cycle. It's cyclical, right? So you might, when thinking about your project partners and who it makes sense to partner with, you think about your project goal and you say, hey, what other organizations might be interested in this goal or share this goal? Or for your budget and financials, when trying to figure out what you should be focusing on, then you can connect it to your project outputs or activities and say, okay, I'm really going to dedicate my resources towards those. So hopefully all of these steps really inform each other. So first off, project goal. What is that? So we think of a project goal as a broad statement describing the desired change in your community resulting from your project. So some examples are eradicating homelessness, preserving our democracy, and strengthening civic engagement. So as you can tell, these are big goals, and we want you to think big. We want you to think about what change you want to achieve and think about using action verbs and describing that. So, when filling out our application or another funder's application and considering what your goals are, think about how the funder is really asking you why. Why this project? Why are these your goals? And funders will want you to identify the need for this change in the community and really, demonstrate why your project is going to tackle that challenge and meet that need. So that's just something to keep in mind generally about the way that your project goals are going to be informing your project and what funders are going to be looking for. So the next step is determining your project outcomes. And what do we mean by project outcomes? So those are concrete and attainable changes in behavior, status, skills, attitude, knowledge, or circumstances. So one tip here is to use action verbs that are describing this process, like increase, decrease, strengthen, and reduce. So what are some examples of that? Your outcomes could be that you want to increase affordable housing opportunities. They could be that you want to increase empathy among diverse communities. Or maybe you want to elevate the understanding of rights and responsibilities of citizens through providing historical context and knowledge. So again, in the application and in kind of figuring out what your outcomes are, know that the funders are really asking why. Why are these your outcomes? The outcomes are really the most important first step towards your goals. And they should be relative to the scope and the mission of your organization. So they're really the first kind of concrete statement of what change you're hoping to affect with your project in that sense. So next up are setting your project outputs or activities. So those are the tangible and concrete products of your projects. So this is actually what people often think of first in terms of their project. So they might think, I want to have an exhibition, I want to have an open mic night, etc. And they maybe are not thinking about their goals and their outcomes first, and that's understandable. So, you could start here with your outputs, but then you need to consider your goals and your outcomes, right? And make sure that your activities are strongly rooted in and motivated by your goals and your outcomes. So they should be the means through which you will realize or attain your outcomes and strive to achieve your goals. So a good step in project planning is asking why. If you want to do an exhibition, why do you want to do an exhibition? Does that really align with your project goals and outcomes? And if not, maybe another output would be better, like a panel discussion or a performance or a community dialogue, etc. So the fourth step, as we see it, is to sort out your project partners. So the partners can be an incredibly impactful aspect to any project. Um, and we always are curious, with grant applications, if potential grantees are partnering with other organizations that share the same goals, outcomes, and/or outputs and activities. Have you considered collaborating with an organization that does similar work in the space, or maybe it's an organization that looks at the same topic but from a different sector's perspective? So, if you're not thinking this way already, we really encourage you to. So, you know, it's really important, obviously, when you're entering into a partnership, that you state the specific roles of partnering individuals and organizations, really thinking about what partners bring to the table. So, there are many kinds of partners and proposed structures to partnerships, but they often really fall into two camps, programmatic and communications. So programmatic could mean that your partners are helping with the design of program, the selection of the content, selecting speakers or scholars or artists, or creating, giving you the space for the event, etc. Whereas communications is more about design of materials, leveraging of other audiences, helping to spread the word, etc. But really what you should be doing is detailing how the proposed partnerships will improve your work, whether it's from a programmatic perspective, a communications perspective, or another perspective altogether. And, we, in our applications, leave space for give the applicants the opportunity to upload letters of commitment or interest from collaborating organizations or community members. And those are very significant, to really demonstrate that there is investment in your project and in your goals and in your outcomes and your outputs outside of you or your organization. So we touched on communications a little bit just now, but to really flesh that out. So we are focused on making sure that you have a well-rounded project. So communications and publicity are really important. It's always a shame when people realize really wonderful projects, but then are not able to connect them with the audiences that they want to share them with, or the communities. So we hope that that thinking through this helps our grantees prevent that. So first, think about what your plans are for engaging the public with your project. But I think a really important thing here is, what do we mean by the public, right? Because, theoretically, all projects are for everyone, but by narrowing your target audience, figuring out audience goals, and really setting out outreach methods, you can really make that more specific and therefore a lot more effective. So in terms of target audiences, some of examples of those might be K through 12 students, which is kind of, a wide range, right? You could be reaching out to military veterans. You could be reaching out to LGBTQ youth. You could be reaching out to Spanish speakers in your community, or it could be the general public. That's true as well. In terms of your audience goals, don't always assume that bigger is better. Maybe you're trying to have a really intensive and focused project for 12 people. Maybe you're trying to engage 1,200 people with a big exhibition open for months and months. But, regardless, really thoughtfully consider your audience goals and make sure to clearly articulate them, because you want to make sure that your communications and publicity are actually supporting the kind of program that you want to have. So, in going along with that, whatever your goals are, they should be grounded in the goals, outcomes, and outputs of your project. So in terms of outreach methods, we see both brand new and tried and true methods of outreach working. So, it could be a flyer that's distributed and put up on lampposts and bulletin boards in your community. It could be email campaigns. It could be postcards. It could be word of mouth. It could be social media. It could be a TikTok campaign. It just depends. And sometimes you do it all. And sometimes you do just some of it, knowing your community and your audience. But be sure in your application to emphasize any new audiences and the methods you're employing to try to reach them. So next up is everyone's favorite, the money. So looking at your project budget. The first bullet point here is really important. So thinking about what really are your project's financial needs. We encourage you to be sure to consider everything from cold, hard cash to volunteer hours and standard operating expenses, and really be honest with yourself. You know, what do you actually need to realize this project, and what's more of a nice to have, and what could you get via donation, you know, in kind or otherwise. Those are really important questions to consider. So generally, funders and applicants should consider the two major components of a project budget, which are the request to the funder and the match from other sources. So the request is the dollars that are specifically requested from the funder. So that would be the total grant amount. And then the match is funding from other sources. The Council for the Humanities and our standard grant making program, we do require a one-to-one match for all funding requested from the council, meaning for every dollar requested from the council, you need to demonstrate in your budget that you have a dollar of funding from another source, whether that's a cash contribution or an in-kind contribution. So as I just said, that funding does fall into, that match funding falls into the categories of cash. So that's either from you or other funders, or in-kind donations, like a volunteer donating their time. Maybe they're helping at your event for 2 hours and they would normally charge $20 an hour for that. So that's a $40 in-kind contribution. So you want to itemize really based on reason. So line items are very important. And it's important to, so by that I mean in a budget, each line, you know, so if in your budget you have a line for staffing time for your volunteer, and you're gonna say like, you know, volunteer time, and you wanna be clear about where you're getting the numbers. So putting your calculations and your rates out there is really helpful. So you'd say like 2 hours at $20 an hour, and then the line item would be $40, right? But making it obvious to the funder that you've really thought through all of the different financial elements, and you know, making it easy for someone else to follow your train of thought about how you're going to be spending this money. So you want to also consider funder expectations and restrictions. So it's important to know what restrictions, if any, your funder has on the expenditure of the grant funds. So for example, the council disperses federal funding. So we have a number of restrictions on how our grantees can use our grant money because of that. And if you'd like more details on that, I encourage you to look at our grant guidelines or watch our video that's just our general grant making information workshop video. But generally, you know, regardless of who your funder is, make sure that you are meeting their expectations and restrictions. And often, you know, when you do receive an award, you'll receive a grant agreement that's really going to spell all those out in great detail. So always take a look at that. So now we're getting into part 7, evaluation, at long last, right? But as you'll see, everything we just talked about feeds into this, right? So when we're getting into the different steps in evaluating your project, that's going to be made much easier by everything you've already done. So first off, an evaluation goal. What is that? Well, it establishes a core focus area for your evaluation plan so that you don't have to evaluate everything, right? You want to think through, why are you evaluating, and let the goal guide your evaluation plan and what it is you actually want to measure. So try to use the structure, I want to know X so that I can do Y. So here are some examples. So I want to know the demographics of my audience members to improve my outreach and engagement plan. I want to know the true financial costs of my program so that I can better plan a budget next year. I want to know if my partners in the project felt supported and engaged in program planning to improve how I structure partnerships and engage with community members and organizations going forward. So those are just a few examples of evaluation goals you can set. Now, evaluation questions allow you to further sharpen your evaluation goal and your evaluation plan. So evaluation questions are broad guiding questions that determine the direction of your evaluation. So really asking, what do you want to measure? What do you want to learn? And make sure that these questions are answerable, right? That they're actually things that you can find out. And they should be based on your evaluation goal that you just set, and also your project outcomes and your outputs, okay? So based in the concrete changes you're trying to achieve and the ways that you're trying to achieve them. So when answered, evaluation questions should indicate progress towards your goals. So here are some examples of what that looks like. Where were my audience members from, and how did they hear about my program? What were the cash and in-kind costs of my program? Who were my most important partners, and for what reasons? So those are actually aligning with the evaluation goals that we had set out earlier, right? So next up, evaluation indicators. So indicators, that's what allows us to assign measuring points to all of these pieces of a project that we're trying to evaluate. So indicators should indicate, right, how you know if your project and its activities achieved or did not achieve your goals and intended outcomes. So you might need to think creatively about what your indicators are, particularly for arts and culture projects. But overall, it's data that demonstrates the change in behavior, skill set, and knowledge described in your outcome statements. So they're really indicators that let you know what success actually looks like. So we encourage our applicants to be specific in coming up with their indicators and to use numbers, percentages, and engagement levels, and quantifiable metrics that they can use. So some examples would be that your indicators are that over 75 people attended the event. Ticket sales increased by 25%. Over one half of the respondents to a survey about the activity made a connection to a different culture. So these are also, you're seeing, are specific and aspirational. So basically you're saying at the outset of the project, if over 75 people attend my exhibition, I know that I have, that's what success looks like to me, progress towards my goal. And then finally, methods. So this is what most people jump to when they think of an evaluation plan. So remember our friend who was writing a survey the night before the program, they were starting with methods. But as we now know, the evaluation process actually starts way earlier, back during the goals phase, and that everything you've already done informs the methods, right? So the methods of collecting information should be reflective of evaluation questions and indicators. So keep those in mind when you're choosing evaluation methods. So, you're saying, okay, we know our goals, we want to make progress towards them in X and Y ways, which are our outcomes. We know how to achieve our outcomes through our programs and involving audiences, which are our outputs. We know what we want to know more about as it relates to our program evaluation goals. We know what questions to ask to find answers to our questions, which are the evaluation questions, and we know the indicators of our success, the evaluation indicators. So what are the means by which we can gather data as it relates to our indicators, evaluation questions, and evaluation goal? So there are many ways to gather data for a project and to understand if you're making progress on your outcomes via your indicators. So evaluation methods include surveys, public pre and post assessment. So that means that you would ask an attendee a question at the beginning of the program and then the same question at the end and compare those answers to see the change your program affected. There's focus groups. There's observations where you're observing your outputs and taking specific notes. There's interviews with partners or interviews with audience members and more. Again, you might need to be creative here. So that is, we're finding ourselves at the end of the project cycle, right? So I know that that was a lot of information. And, depending on what kind of learner you are, that might be hard to hear and remember and piece it all together. So I wanted to make sure you knew about our handy evaluation toolkit action plan. So this is on the council's website. You can find it there, and it's a really wonderful summary of the project cycle and evaluation plan that I just went through, including definitions and examples. So, you're seeing here that the clear definitions of project goal that we went over, outcomes, outputs, evaluation goal, evaluation questions, indicators, and methods. So I really suggest that you find this on our website and take a look at it for reference. And I also want to point out that if you do go through the council's grant application process, you'll have to describe each of these steps in the cycle as part of your application. So many grantees actually find that filling out our application helps them think through their project. So I just want to end by talking quickly through two examples of what evaluation plans for particular projects look like, since I know it can be helpful to have concrete examples. I'm one of those learners. So you can also find those examples in the evaluation toolkit PDFs on our website. So here's our first one. It's a documentary film featuring local youth organizers in Providence. So the goal of this project is to increase the civic agency of youth in Rhode Island. Okay, so they're thinking big, right? Their outcomes, they want to increase public knowledge about local youth organizers. They want to empower young activists. They want to increase youth interest in participating in political events and after-school programs. So we're seeing those action verbs, right? Increase, empower. So how are they going to do it? Their outputs. They're going to produce a documentary film. They're going to host 3 public screenings at local high schools. They're going to create direct action guides to distribute at screenings, and they're going to host 1 public panel about local politics and youth engagement. So kind of looking at this project, they'll have to ask themselves, what do they actually want to evaluate here? What's the question they want to answer? So this group decided that they wanted to better understand the impact of their documentary film and its effect on local individuals and organizations connected to the subject matter so that they can improve outreach and engagement efforts. So how are they going to do that? How are they going to better understand this impact? So their questions are about, you're seeing that they're specific and answerable, right? What audiences did we reach, and were the audiences they wanted to reach? What particular features of the project made the biggest impact? And what was the value of participation in the project for the local youth organizers? Okay, so how will they know if they've actually made this impact? What are the indicators? So their indicators are the documentary film is finished by the deadline, and that the people they portrayed are excited about it. There are 3 different local high schools that are hosting public screenings with the attendance goal of 35 people, that there is an increase of people signing up in the 2 months following the first screening by 3 times the normal rate. So again, specific, right? We're seeing these numbers, 35, 3 times, and that youth organizers are participating on the panel and 100 people, again, specific, are attending the panel. And how are they going to know if they met these indicators? What methods are they going to use? So they're going to use surveys, interviews, and event observations. Okay, so another example, and this is for an individual researcher. So their project is to do research on local musicians of color in Woonsocket. So what's the goal here? Thinking big, they want to inspire new creative practices and create a historical basis for contemporary musicians of color in Northern Rhode Island. Great goal. What are their outcomes here? So their outcomes are that historical narratives of Woonsocket are expanded and diversified, public knowledge of local music is increased, and new audiences are engaged with local Woonsocket history. So expanded, diversified, increased, engaged, right? Then how are they going to do it? Well, they're going to write and publish an article, they're going to host a public lecture, they're going to invite musicians to play music composed by these research musicians, and they're going to publish columns about this. All right, so once this project is delineated, what's the goal here for evaluation? What do you want to know? Because you don't want to try to evaluate everything, right? So the goal here is, that I want to better understand the impact of new research and public engagement methodologies on my work so I can better plan and budget my next project. So the goal is here, to better plan and budget the next project. So what are the questions? What audiences did we reach? Is there any evidence for increase in knowledge? If so, what aspect of the project was important in doing that? And how did the project change the perceived narrative of local history in Woonsocket? So how are we going to know? What is success going to look like? So the indicators are publishing an article with a run of 500 copies, specific number, a public lecture with 80 attendees, 3 local musicians playing music composed by the research musicians and distributing 25 free copies of the composition, and then publishing 3 columns in the call. So again, specific numbers. And then how are they going to collect this information? The methods are making use of online analytics data, personal research journal, and observation methods. So we have taken a wonderful journey together. Thank you so much for watching this video and joining us to learn more about public humanities project evaluation. So again, I'm Julia Renaud, and I'm the Grant Making Program Coordinator at Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. And if you have any questions about this video, please do reach out. My email address is there listed on the screen, and you can also find contact information for council staff on our website, which is rihumanities.org. And we're always happy to hear from you. So thank you so much, be well, and have a lovely day.